Welcome to Science House, Frontier Science House. I'm Steve Clemons. I'm editor-at-large of the National Interest, and I have a pleasure today talking about perhaps one of the most least discussed, most important, global public health challenges out there. We've got a fascinating panel to discuss beating antimicrobial resistance. With us, we have John Schoonbee, who is the CIS-RE Chief Medical Officer. We have Adèle James, who is the Chief Technology Officer and co-founder of Phagos. And we've got Flemming Kondrasen, who is the Chief Scientific Officer of the Novo Nordisk Foundation. It's great to be with all of you. We're going to have a little bit of a conversation here about this. I'm using this selfishly to educate myself on this important topic, and then I really would like to have a conversation with all of you as well. So, think ahead. Have you got good, smart questions? Just don't make them too long or I'll cut you off. So let me just start out with you, John. And as we sort of look at this, I've had folks tell me that the AMR, antimicrobial resistance challenge, is really like a slow burn pandemic. And I would like us to get, for our audience's sake, not only why you're involved as an insurance company, but get ourselves around why this is becoming such an issue. And I do believe, from my deep dive into this over the last few days, I can't believe we're not having many more discussions about this and have raised the decibel level of concern far more substantially. So I'm really pleased that this is here on the promenade in Davos. But can you give us a quick tutorial of what's happening?
Sure. So Swiss Re has been worried about this for over a decade. So we've really been looking at this. And one of the reasons we've been looking at this is very much because of the slow burn and our very long-term life policies that we reinsure. We need to predict what's going to happen 20, 30, 50 years into the future.
So how screwed are we 30 or 50 years from now?
Yeah, so we think we're still all right. We worry a lot about metabolic health and obesity, but certainly AMR is one of the things that does worry us, which is why we've really played a big role in convening experts from around the world, multiple events, to talk about this and to create some kind of change. 1.2 million people a year die from AMR. 65 odd million people a year generally die. So we're talking almost 2% of mortality is AMR, right? So and that's significant. So you asked earlier, is this a thing that's going to hit us in the future? No, it's hit us. The horse has bolted, and there's a lot we can do, but we need to start doing it, right?
Flemming, let me ask you, what are the biggest drivers? I'm a journalist, and I know I oversimplify things, but I know the world is not filled with villains and white hat good people, but who are the villains from your perspective, or what practices are the villains in this story that the public is not aware of?
Yeah, of course, I don't know what the public is aware or not aware of, but the question is still super relevant. So we see that there's a misuse of antibiotics, so not based on diagnostics or not based on following guidelines, for example. So there's an overuse that may be in animal husbandry, it may also be in human sectors. So the management and the use is one issue. And then, of course, we also have the development side of things. So there's not enough investment into the development of new drugs, therapies, and that's because the market doesn't work. It's also because it's an area that's have a lower profitability than
explain
other areas.
Why isn't the pharmaceutical industry responding in the way you think works? Why is the market absent?
So for many of these products, if you go to a biotech or pharma company and ask them to produce a drug, that the system should use as little as at all possible. And for some of the most new generation drugs, keep it in storage and pretend and hopefully never make use of it. That's not a very good business case. So we need new models which are emerging across Europe and elsewhere, where you're actually having some sort of an income by keeping it in stock. So it incentivizes the industry to develop and produce and distribute drugs that are more backup than a regular use. So if you really want to be stringent on diagnostics and really have a tight management and really want to prevent the use in frontline, it of course prevents the market from growing from a pharmaceutical perspective. So it's kind of different from obesity drugs. We want people within a certain category to use it consistently for a period of time to bring down weight. But this is actually a stuff we want to use only when it really matters. Same for obesity drugs for a certain category of people. But it's more profitable to develop other drugs than antimicrobials.
Well, I want to get back at this in a little while because I'm really interested in the literacy level of the profession and just thinking about knowing about it. My sense is literacy is probably pretty low. But I want to hit on the business side of it. Adèle, you're in the business of this. You have a firm that is engaged in research and you're in animal husbandry, but so you are engaged in the business and in the marketplace of this. Tell us about that and why are you in it, since nobody else is?
So indeed, we are developing alternatives to antibiotics. So we treat bacterial infection with bacteriophages, which are the natural predators of bacteria. And we are in animal farming as a first market. So we are first in this market because there is a pain, meaning there are infections, and ban of antibiotic usage plus antibiotics not working anymore, meaning that farmers really need solutions to be able to produce as they should do. And for us, indeed, it's also one of the main users of antibiotics, animal farming sector. And this is why we chose this sector as a first market to have the broader impact we can have on AMR on the large scale.
So help me understand this, and I apologize that I'm such a lay person when it comes to, my understanding is part of the reason we have so much antimicrobial resistance out there is because we've overused certain drugs and bioproducts, and we have them in our Colgate and our little dishwashing, and we've got them everywhere and spreading, and I've seen the campaigns to try to roll some of that back. Are you developing more drugs to deal with the cattle and other things that are no longer resistant? And do you not run into the same evolutionary problem that if you were to succeed, you've actually just extended the problem?
So actually, we are developing a new category of medicines because bacteria are always evolving, and to treat them, to be able to eradicate them, we are also developing ever-evolving cures using those bacteriophages, meaning that with our platform we have developed that is powered by AI, of course, to be able to produce cures as fast as we can.
I thought we were going to have one meeting today without the mention of AI. We have science is going to, but no, so go into the AI.
Yes.
Okay, we're in the AI, go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, sorry, for us it's very important for the speed and precision of development. So really, I really need to mention it, not just to say. And so yeah, our cures are ever evolving, meaning that we are always knowing what's happening in a farm and always able to adapt a phage cocktail, meaning a combination of phages we've sent on this farm. And yeah, this is a new category of medicines now for animal farming, but maybe later for humans as well. And yeah, as those microorganisms are becoming resistant because they are able to evolve, we think it's the only way to deal with it is by developing evolving cures as well.
John?
A good question you asked is, aren't they going to become, aren't bugs going to become resistant to what they're developing? And the answer is, AMR will always happen, right? You can't stop it.
It's an evolution.
It's about slowing the process of AMR. So it's about allowing a drug to last longer and funding development of new drugs. But from when the very first antibiotics came about, right, streptomycin was used for TB. It's one of the things that kind of slowed Davos's growth. Davos was all about being a sanatorium health space for people with TB, right? And streptomycin came about, and hey, we cured TB, but that lasted a year or two. And then suddenly, that didn't cure TB anymore. So no matter what drug we use, resistance will develop, but we need to slow it down.
John, what does the global map look like of vulnerability to AMR? When you kind of look at Africa, you look at the continents around the world, you look at big population centers, is there any place in the world that stands out for excellence in this? Or is the entire planet essentially engaged in the running over the cliff on AMR?
So because there are a lot of different factors that drive AMR, particularly AMR deaths, right? Healthcare system and how good a healthcare system is and how good the infectious control is in a hospital plays a big role. So the developing countries tend to have high mortality rates, probably about double compared to developed countries. Australia, I think, does better as a region compared to most of the world. But, you know, we're not talking orders of magnitude difference. We're talking about maybe double the rates in developing countries compared to developed countries.
Flemming?
No, so picking up on that, so obviously as we discuss, we need development and we need development into a market. But the point is very relevant. We also need to reduce the transmission. We need to reduce, you could say, the incidence, the burden, the transmission of disease. So in increasingly, vaccines are seen as a part of the solution. Where I work at the Novo Nordisk Foundation, we also, like many others, investing in preventive vaccines to protect people, but also to slow transmission for some cases. And of course also the general hygiene. We know that sanitation, water, and we know hygiene and stewardship at hospitals, senior residence homes and so on are very important. So I fully agree, it's about slowing. It's about protecting those that are most vulnerable. And that has many combinations. So it's not just the pharmaceutical side, but it's other elements also in preventing burden of disease.
You know, if you go down the promenade, Cisco Systems has a set of screens that they can monitor in real time, you know, who's launching malware, who's launching nefarious stuff on the internet. And I'm fascinated by this kind of global awareness thing. Do we have anything like that in the AMR space? You know, when there are flare-ups or you begin to see, you know, waves of infection or deaths in an area around the world that are AMR related, do we have that in place today so that, you know, there's some central body that's notified, hey, there's a problem in Haiti or there's a problem in Czech Republic or something?
So of course there are various monitoring
Who does the monitoring?
So WHO are involved, there are regional bodies involved, there are many research networks involved. Getting access to the samples and doing the testing and sharing the information and so on will always be incomplete and will always be behind. But we do have an idea, of course, of where, and to your point before, we see that India is a place, of course, because it's very big, is a place where we have to invest, and India is already investing, having tremendous people and insights in this area. That's an area where we also need to invest. So there are regional differences in what are the nature of the transmission and so on. We can see increasing tourism, including medical tourism, also spreading resistant strains across the world. So preparedness of our healthcare systems in preventing, but also getting, as you say, picking up the signals of where it goes wrong, being able to intervene fast, is like any epidemic, potentially pandemic issues. It's about monitoring, but also the response capacity. And at the moment, our healthcare services in most places of the world are, of course, fragmented. And when you then add on top of that the animal husbandry sector, it's a pretty difficult situation. And in many places, you can enter a pharmacy and buy whatever you want over the counter without any diagnostics. So that's a soup made for the breeding of resistant strains of bacteria.
So let me ask you, you know, thinking about the response of this, I mean, and Novo Nordisk Foundation, for those of you have what, 180 companies that are you know, part of the Novo Nordisk family, et cetera. The foundation has been around for a long time looking at these public health issues. Swiss Re is huge, Phagos will be huge. And as you kind of look at this, I'm just very interested in the mismatch between public policy awareness and response, the financial and political commitment to do something. And what I hear from you folks is a high decibel level concern for mankind, if you will. I mean, I assume you believe it's a serious issue or you wouldn't be here. But the question is, what about that mismatch, John? And does it worry you? And what are the tools, other than appearing in Davos, do you think need to be used to kind of figure out how to match better policy responses and financial responses to the problem?
Yeah, I think one of the issues is that it's again, people think of it as a future problem, right? AMR has been around forever. It's getting worse. We have got a couple of drugs kind of in the back that we use. they're more dangerous. They're not as effective, and I think it's just not top of mind for people. And Swiss Re was part of an initiative in Switzerland called Spearhead that started in 2021, and we convened experts from across multiple sectors to look at what can be done in Switzerland. And one of the things, to come back to the monitoring, was Basel University Hospital. And they developed a real-time monitoring system within the hospital to be able to track all the antibiotics that are being prescribed, what resistance they're seeing. And you know, you'd think in a system like Switzerland, right, a super health system, very advanced hospital systems, they didn't have this monitoring. But now they do, right? And they're wanting to share it broadly across Switzerland and beyond. And again, it's having these conversations and getting people involved in collaborations so that we can improve things and we can make them aware of this.
I mean, isn't it kind of weird? I'd love to get Adèle and Flemming's take on the question. But isn't it kind of weird that you have to basically stockpile? I'm just interested in what the business is of generating these microbial response drugs, which you don't want to use, right? You want to stockpile them and have them and get someone to invest in them, but they're there for a rainy day, right? They're not, I mean, or is your business model different? Are you going to make money by the use of the drugs you're innovating?
Yeah, of course. So we are today already, to go back to your previous question on the regulation side, for example, we got quite quickly the authorization to sell thanks to National Veterinary Medicine Agency. So it means that they are aware and open to new things because it's really one of the major threats for humanity. And on the business side, indeed, today we are selling preventive approach to be sure that the infection won't occur and that the production won't be affected. In animal farming, at least, we've just started selling last year, small amounts, but we hope it will go way higher and be adopted by all the farms we are working with.
That's great. Flemming?
Yes, to your earlier question about where we are on the decibel in terms of scary stuff, I think what we haven't communicated well enough is that it's not just primary infections we are wanting to control, which becomes harder and harder, but the entire healthcare system is potentially being undermined. So surgery, it's going to be an issue. Or we are talking about hip replacement is going to be an issue.
No, I mean this is I have friends that are afraid to go to hospitals for these because of the vulnerability they will have to other forms of AMR infections.
Yeah.
Right? It's a huge level of concern.
And when we are looking at data coming out from cancer patients, many die
Right.
from multi-resistant strains. So I think the narrative, the story is also, first of all, it's not just in a faraway place.
Right.
To your point, it's not into the future. It's here. And it's not just specific infections that sound strange, and we haven't probably.
So, what's the policy response, or imagine you're talking to a field of policymakers and legislators from around the world right now. What would you tell them they should be doing?
So, of course, policy matters in terms of the guidelines to be implemented, or the basic reduction. In Denmark, where I live, I can see in nursing homes for senior citizens, we have a very poor diagnostics policy. We have a very poor prescribing policy on antimicrobial resistance or infections. We need to improve. That's a policy. So we need in subsectors, you mentioned hospitals, we also need to improve in these areas. But we need to build markets. We need to build markets that can drive and incentivize industry also to develop continuously a pipeline of new candidates, to go into clinical trials, to enter into the registration and into the markets. So there are many policy areas, the animal husbandry sector, many subsectors of human health. So it's quite an array of different policy arenas. But at the end of the day, we need to prevent as much as we can. And that may be vaccines, it may be hygiene approaches, it may be all kinds of other stuff. Prevent infections. We also need to make rational, optimal use of antibiotics. And then we also need to drive the development and marketing of new products. So many different fields, not just one silver bullet. It's a whole array of different interventions.
Can it just be 2 or 3 silver bullets?
I don't think so, but I think from a policy...
Always a whole system. Everybody always wants to talk about the whole system.
But I can break it down. So the final point from your policy perspective, any politicians, certainly dealing with healthcare, should be concerned of the potential breakdown of trust and cost as it associates with the general healthcare service. And antimicrobial resistance is one of the few things that could actually make the whole healthcare service break.
I promised no good news this morning. We're going to come to you. We'll get to you. Go ahead, John. You want to jump in?
Steve, you are, one of the first questions you asked is like, who's the bad actor?
Yeah.
Right, in all of this. And I don't think there's a single bad actor. I think there are multiple. It's kind of a confluence of many different things.
Right.
But one of the problems is the average consumer out there, the average patient. Because if you look, and maybe education is something, because if you look at the number of antibiotics prescribed versus what is actually necessary, it's 4 or 5 times more. And that is because of the pressure that gets put on the doctors. But then there's also the health system that, it's hard to get an appointment, so you may as well get an antibiotic if you can't come back again. But I think the person on the street tends to think, well, if I get an antibiotic, it's a good thing. It's better for me.
I want to ask one more question. I'm going to go to the gentleman who's about to jump out of his seat. You seem so excited. And so we're going to bring you all in early. But look, this evening I'm interviewing Martin Wolf of the Financial Times, and the topic is really going to be the rise of mercantilism, which is really, the sense that in global economics and trade and, kind of multilateral deal-making in the economic sphere, that is fragmenting and coming apart. And there is a kind of beggar thy neighbor, zero-summism in economics that's emerging. You feel it in this town during this Davos. I've really been interested in the lessons of COVID, where you also saw, these seizures and this kind of nationalism take over the health. And what I would argue is some real negative impacts on the global public health problem, right? If you look at this a global public goods problem, how do you solve this when so many of the other patterns, you've got fragmentation and balkanization, although my friends in the Balkans hate that term, but basically fragmentation of cooperation, not a kind of synthesized realization that what needs is global public action. Does that worry you, and what's the response? Adèle?
Tough one, especially for us, for example, on the regulation side, where we needed to go country by country, even though we are using the same solution. It would have been easier to go global, or at least at the European level first. But it's too complicated, so we had to go at the national level. And of course, I think it's a problem that people are starting to get aware. I don't know if I'm biased, probably I'm biased a bit, but I still think that people that can make decisions are open to hear and open to help as well. And also to add on that, today we are working in animal farming because we think we can have an impact, but it'll also have an impact on human, because it's a global problem, and bacteria becoming resistant in the environment, in the field because of animal farming, can further also be responsible for resistance in humans. So we are trying to act globally.
I guess my response would be, keep it up, that's great, but I don't know how to achieve success without like a World Health Organization treaty or G20 collective action, or something that takes the wonderful boutique of what you're doing and turns it into norms and habits that matter for the world. And right now, the world's not kind of behaving, right? So the United States is particularly not behaving.
But as it's a new category of medicine, they also need proof, and this is what we are trying to do in France, and let's use those proof to make it globalized, maybe soon.
John, your thoughts?
Yeah, so the UN, 2024, right? They came up with this goal by 2030 to reduce AMR deaths by 10%. So I think they're big national organizations, international organizations, that are really trying to drive this and create cohesion. And that's one of the things that Swiss Re does, right? We try and create dialogue, we try and bring different actors into the room from around the world.
So I should be optimistic.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
No, so
hard for me.
So to your point about, yes, it is a global public good. And it can also be broken down into subsectors and regions and so on. But at the end of the day, this is going to spread. So it does require a common approach to prevention, and the cost involved in developing some of these not very profitable new technologies for rapid diagnostic and RMR testing at the same time, or the vaccines or whatever. It is a global public good more than other areas of pharmaceutical science, you could say. And yes, I'm afraid that the willingness of the global community to co-invest in such a global public good has reduced. We are becoming more selfish, geographically isolated, and so on and so forth. We see it in international aid and so on. So maybe the large businesses, as you say, can be a convening factor. Of course, at a much smaller scale, but philanthropic organizations like the one I work with, we are working closely with many organizations like It and Welcome and many other smaller and larger foundations to try to co-invest in that global public good. It's sometimes a little against the odds because the market we spoke about before, or the global coherence, but there are actors out there willing to put forward cash and ideas and whatever to facilitate and coordinate that we get there. But it has not become easier the past.
I appreciate your candor, and I think it's very important to have a realistic view of what the challenge is.
Thanks for the great discussion. My name is Tim Wintermantel. I'm with IQVIA, and I lead our private sector engagement on global health topics. And AMR and our AMR Center of Excellence is actually a really important part in it, using data, feeding national action plans and others. I have a comment and a question also to John. So the first comment is, there is a space for national action, and actually shamelessly advertising a white paper where we lay out more national ownership on action plans on AMR, because unlike other tragedies of the commons, this affects national health systems. Right. And there is a national case for having your own fire brigade in case a fire comes up. So it's a bit easier to contribute also for your ongoing discussion, Steve. There's also a need for having the treatment sites more research ready. Because if you have a new drug and you want to develop it, you want to obviously test it where the problem is biggest, but that's not often where you find the clinical research sites to actually develop drugs.
Right.
So there's also a case for national action in order to speed up research. And if there's one lesson from COVID, if we are able to really tremendously speed up innovation, we strengthen our system and strengthen pandemic preparedness.
Just real quick to you, what is the deficit in that structure right now that needs to be remedied? I remember interviewing, I think it was Richard Hatchett of CEPI, when CEPI came together, and CEPI was essentially, what many countries were doing to try to basically develop, some sort of central coordinating commons that would develop. I don't know how successful or unsuccessful CEPI has been, but it seems to me to be an interesting model, and it seems to be close to what you're describing.
Don't get me started on our collaboration with Richard, which is great.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we would sit here the rest. But suffice it to say, we managed actually in an outbreak scenario in Africa to stand up a clinical trial in less than 14 days. So I'm a great fan of CEPI, and I'm very proud of what our team.
But what else is needed?
Support. For antimicrobial resistance, I think you mentioned it, Flemming, the surveillance and the data infrastructure on the hospital levels, understanding which patients you have and understanding which problems those patients have in microbial surveillance is a really important first step, both for the actual combating, but also for the research in developing new drugs and maybe developing the technologies that Adèle's company is using. Sorry, quick question back to John, as I promised a question. Where do you see the role for insurers in dealing with the problem, but then convening?
Interesting.
So that's a great question. I guess to set the context, right, we're a reinsurer, and we mostly do life reinsurance, so not health. So I'm not sure if you're asking about health insurers or life insurers. I think it's different, right? But I think the primary role would be for health insurers to try and somehow steer the healthcare system or pay for care that somehow is, acknowledges stewardship and adapts to good stewardship.
So please give a round of applause to Professor Flemming Kondrasen with the Novo Nordisk Foundation, Adèle James, the co-founder of Phagos, and John Schoonbee with Swiss Re. Thank you all very, very much. Thanks.